Hello, my name is Jack Meyer. I'm an interviewer for the Public Library of Cincinnati in Hamilton County. I'm interviewing Mr. Ralph Bud Vance Jr. on August 30th, 2006 at the Anderson Branch Library. Our camera operator today is Mr. Michael Alfieri. Mr. Vance, why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about your early background, how you came to come into the service, and then some of your experiences while you were on duty.
Okay, Jack. I started in Miami University in the fall of '42, and there were so many the guys that I ran around with up at Miami that were going into service so in the spring, excuse me, in the spring of '42 or '43, I decided to enlist, which I did at that point in time. I started to go into the Army over northern Kentucky at, excuse me if I have to refer to these notes, at Fort Thomas, Kentucky. And from there we boarded a troop train, and we went to Riverside, California. Now, Jack, do you want me to proceed on this?
Please do.
At Camp Hahn, a 125th AAA gun battalion was formed. Now, this consisted of primarily 90 millimeters. There were guys from Kentucky and Ohio and West Virginia that went to make up this 125th AAA gun battalion. We went into basic training there, the marching and so on. We then went to Camp Edwards, excuse me, which is in the Mojave Desert, for 6 weeks of training on 90 millimeters and also on our 50s. We became familiar with those guns and tearing those guns down and, of course, firing them and the whole ball of wax. The thing that I remember most about the Mojave Desert was the range of temperatures from 115 or 20 during the day, and it would freeze water at night. During that 6-week period, we had two 10 to 15 mile marches with full field packs, and that is something that certainly sticks into my mind. We then went to Camp Livingston in Louisiana for further training on our 90s, and after our training there of some month to 6 weeks, we went to Camp Edwards, Massachusetts, which was a port of embarkation to go to Europe. We sailed at that point to England on the George Washington troop ship. The George Washington had been a cruise liner, and it took us between 7 and 8 days to get to England. We had 3 to 4 submarine scares, but fortunately we made it to England in good shape. Our mission in England was to fire at V-2 rockets, which was nicknamed buzz bombs. Each buzz bomb had 1,000 pounds of TNT in the nose and would cause tremendous damage to whatever it might be dropped on. After firing at buzz bombs, we followed the German launching sites as the war progressed, went over into France, and at that point in time, winter was upon us, and that was coming up onto the winter of '44, and the Germans had planned a big push. In December 6th of '44, the German breakthrough began, and at that point, coincidentally, at that point, one of these buzz bombs hit one of our personnel carriers that pulled one of our 90 millimeters, and there were 14 men on this personnel carrier, and all of these men were killed. And that's one of the things that really does haunt my memory and stick in my mind, because as we reviewed the dangers of what we were up against, and at that point in time, I was only 19 years old, and I think, well, I really hadn't come to the realization of what this war was all about until that particular incident really got our attention. And as I recall, I sure grew up in a hurry at that point in my life. We were given orders to set our guns up at a little town by the name of Modave, France. After 4 to 5 days of strafing by German planes, we were told to destroy our guns for retreat. The Germans were moving a panzer division into the area, and we did not have the firepower, even though we had 90 millimeters, we did not have the firepower to stop them. The next day we were informed that the Germans had run out of gas, and so we were advised to just hold things and sit tight. Early the next morning we heard a roar of half-tracks, and of course our immediate thought was, well, the Germans had got their petrol and they were coming at us. Well, praise God, it was a group of men from General Patton's 3rd Army who had traveled over 2 days to get to our location. I give the Lord credit for stepping in and using General Patton's forces to save our necks at the time. By January of '45, the Battle of the Bulge, as it was called, was history. We moved on to Liège, Belgium, in order to set and protect a master radar setup. It was obvious that the war was winding down, and as we got into spring and summer, we felt, boy, we're just, it looks like we've really survived. In February of '46, we got the good news that we were going home. It took us, on a Liberty ship, it took us 8 to 8.5 days to get home, back to New York, and we crossed the North Atlantic. In one of the roughest seas that the sailors on board of that boat said that they had ever seen. Well, as a result, most everyone, other than the sailors, we were extremely sick, but knowing that we were coming to the end of our 3-year stay in the service, we knew it was almost over, and it would have taken a lot more than that to have been, that would have discouraged us. I got through World War II because my mom and dad prayed daily, and my mother wrote a letter every single day to me, all the 2 years that I was overseas. I know that I was in the Lord's care, and I did not realize it at the time. My memory of these days are rapidly fading, but every once in a while, thanks to a conversation like this, some of these things do come to mind, and I can reflect back on some of the incidents that happened and some of the things that I managed to live through. And I'm so thankful for my wife and for my kids and my grandkids, and I just look forward to the time when perhaps, as Mike mentioned earlier in our conversation this morning, that perhaps some point in time, perhaps my great-grandchildren or their children will have an opportunity to review this tape and just have an idea of what I did do and what I did contribute.
Bud, let me ask a couple questions.
Sure thing, Jack.
You said you used the term follow the buzz bomb sites.
Right.
Did you actually, if I understand, they kept moving back, is that right?
Well,
their launch sites?
As the war progressed, when we got to southern England, the buzz bomb sites were across the channel in France. Well then, as the war progressed, the Germans moved those sites farther and farther east, back into France, and then back into Holland, and then back into an edge of Germany. So we followed those sites at a particular distance, so that as those bombs were, as those B-1s as they were called, were launched, then we could zero in on those B-1s as they came over on their way to London.
Did you actually see what was left of a site then? Did you overrun a former site?
Oh yes, they were just merely launching sites,
yeah,
where they would ignite, start these little motors that ran these buzz bombs or propelled these V1 rockets with like a little putt-putt engine.
Right.
And once you heard the sound of those V1s, it's an eerie sound that you would never forget, especially when you heard them at night. Now we didn't fire that many, but we did fire on them at night. But all of a sudden, either one would kick off because of running out of fuel, or perhaps we would knock one down, but then you'd sit there and wait because you never knew exactly where they were going to hit, because as I mentioned earlier, with that 1,000 pounds of TNT in the nose, wherever it hit was the end of, of whatever it might be, building, personnel, or whatever.
The one that hit your personnel carrier, were they actually firing at you, did you think? Or
No, I think that was probably a buzz bomb that had probably run out of fuel.
Yeah.
Because at that point we were in march order and we were on our way to another location in France, and that's the only thing we could figure, that it was just one of those odd things that happened that it just elected to hit that carrier.
Regarding the order to destroy your guns, did you ever get started on that? Or?
No, we never did, because we were ordered to destroy them. All it was involved was putting a hand grenade in the barrel of our 90 or down in one of our 50s, and that's the way we were to destroy them. But at that point in time, we got the order, fortunately, to sit tight, and which we did, and in that next morning is when we heard the sound of these half-tracks, and we almost knew that it was the Germans, that they had got their petrol, they got their fuel, and that they were on the move. Well, then somebody said, hey, no, hey, and of course everybody says, hey, here comes one of Patton's divisions, one of his 3rd Army divisions coming up, and these guys literally saved our necks, because the next thing, and when they stopped and said, well, what's going on? Well, we said, there's a Panzer division right over the hill, and it was probably within a mile to a mile and a half from us. And they said, well, you know, we're not sure. We said, well, we're not either, but we know that those guys, if they'd had gas, they would have overridden our position before this. And we heard the commotion, and they literally wiped out almost all of that German Panzer division.
You had a photo there of a 90 millimeter that was destroyed. Was
Yes.
that in that same incident with the personnel carrier?
Yes, that personnel carrier, 14 men went to make up the gun crew itself, and the personnel carrier always towed a 90 millimeter, so it was a self-contained type of thing.
You were there until the spring of '46.
February 46.
Right. Tell us what you did from the end of hostilities until you finally did come home.
Well, in the fall of the fall of 45, we did not have enough points, and you were required to have a certain number of points before you could be selected to come home. So they handed us an MP helmet, which we'd never had before, and said, now you guys you're going to reprocess the 101st and 82nd Airborne divisions, because those guys did have enough. In fact, they had more than enough points. So I helped to reprocess those two outfits in order for them to have the paperwork and so on to go to Marseille, France, and sail out of there in order to come home. So that's the way we spent our final months in France, was helping to process those two outfits.
Did that involve collecting some of their equipment?
No, it did not.
Okay.
They had turned in whatever guns they may have had to a central stocking point outside of Reims, France. And so I'm sure some of the paraphernalia that those guys had accumulated, all you had to do was sign a form and fill out a form, and a lot of those guys did bring a lot of that equipment home with them, personal equipment, or equipment that they may have obtained from Germans, swords or pistols or something of that nature.
What was your particular role in, like on a gun crew? Did you have a specific role?
Yeah, I did. I was in charge of 4 50 caliber machine guns. There were 15 guys on my gun crew, and when we would set up a position, it was usually the 4 guns in a square arrangement, and then there were 2 50s let's see, there was 1 50 that always went with each 90 millimeter to give that 90 millimeter crew and gun the protection, hopefully, that they might need in order to ward off any strafing action that the Germans might have.
Did you, were you ever directly on the front lines? Did you have, did you ever see German troops attacking you?
Not attacking us, no, but we saw German troops in march order or in well, their caravans that they followed a lot of times. But as far as like our number one of the Big Red One, the infantry division, those guys were right up where they saw a lot of times hand-to-hand combats.
Right.
But we were never in that kind of a situation.
So your biggest danger was the strafing airplanes.
That's right. That's exactly right. Along that line, after we moved out of the Battle of the Bulge and went up to Liège, Belgium, to watch this master radar setup that we had at Liège, we had what they called a tracking head, and which was part of our overall radar. And a good friend of mine, Sergeant Schulte, was one of the occupants in that trailer, and an ME-109 two German planes, both ME-109 planes, came in and made strafing action against our positions. The second the second pass they made, they strafed this trailer, and I thought, oh, wonder if well, they left. And I went immediately to the trailer and said, is everybody okay in here? And they said, no, Schulte's been hit. Well, Schulte was hit right here with a 20 millimeter. And of course, he was dead before he hit the ground. But that was one of the incidents in the war. This was a very unpleasant thing to me, because we were looking at temperatures of at night 10 below, 15 below zero. And I knew that we had to have antifreeze for the jackets of our 50s. I went to the man who was in charge of the motor pool, a first lieutenant, and I told him, I said, I would like some antifreeze for our 90 millimeter or our 50 calibers. Well, what do you want that? I said, well, if we get in a position where we have to shoot because of this cold weather, these things will freeze up and they won't be worth a darn. Well, he didn't. He wouldn't authorize antifreeze for my guns, and as a result, I held him responsible. I still hold him responsible for the death of Schulte, because I feel like if those guns had been in working order, that we would have been able to at least discourage those two planes from making that second pass. So again, these are the things that we saw in service, that you run into periodically, that you see you have no control over, but you look back on them and think, oh boy, if we had done this and so. You know, it's the old thing of looking at hindsight again. Oh, if we'd have done, you know, this wouldn't have happened. Well, you know, but again, just one of the things that this conversation brings to my mind.
Are there any other incidents in training, and particularly while you're in Europe, either humorous or otherwise, that you can remember that would be interesting to us?
Oh, I think one of the things we overran a storage area that was filled with champagne, dry monopole 1937. And I don't know whether that's, you know, what kind of champagne that was, but I know that there were literally, we went into this, it was down underground in a storage area, and this friend of mine, Ray Giannetti, I said, Ray, it looks like champagne. He said, that's exactly what it is. Well, we got it out, and boy, here's 1937 dry monopole, and I haven't thought about that designation in a long time, but we drank quite a bit of that, and I'll never forget the headache that I had from drinking that. And of course, it wasn't warm because it had been in a storage area below ground, so it was, I suppose, you know, maybe in the 50s or something like that. But I thought that is absolutely the best champagne that I've never drank but very little champagne in years past. But boy, that was the best stuff until it hit me, and I think it took me 3 days to get over that hangover, and I'm sure that's what it was from drinking that champagne. But that was one of the things, one of the funny things that we look back on, and you can laugh about today.
Did you have much contact with the civilian population?
Very little. The only contact we had with the civilian population was when we were going across France. And this happened mostly at night. In would come a group of French fighters, French underground. And these guys were a thorn in the side of these Germans, because those guys worked primarily during the night hours to do whatever they could do to scuttle or destroy whoever in respect to the Germans that they could destroy. Some of these guys, most spoke French, and I could speak a little French at the time because I'd taken French in college, and I could communicate to a point with these guys. But it was interesting to listen to some of the stories that these men could tell, and you could tell that they were rough characters. I mean, because they lived off the land, and they lived primarily the civilians in the French countryside are the ones that kept these guys going. They supplied them with food and water and clothing whenever need be. And so that is the only contact, Jack, that I had with any of the French people.
Anything else come to your mind during your period of service?
No, not really. I just look back as sort of with fond memories of the time I spent in California. I'd never been there before, nor have I been since. And I sort of hoped that, other than going on past to Riverside, a couple incidents. We went on 2 different times. We went into Hollywood, and I went to the Brown Derby, and I can't remember that I rubbed shoulders with any of the celebrities. Like a lot of guys danced with some of these movie stars, but I can't remember that. I can remember that this buddy of mine and I went to Bing Crosby's home, and we walked up the driveway, and we had a map telling where these houses were. We walked up the map and up this back walk, and went to the back door and knocked, and this colored gal came to the back door, and we said, "Is Mr. Crosby here?" "No," she said, he's not. He's doing a show down someplace south of Riverside." Well, she said, "You boys come on in here. I want to give you a sandwich." Nicest colored gal. We went in, sat down at the kitchen table, and she made us a sandwich, and we had something, a Coke or something, and sat there and talked to her, asking her questions about Bing Crosby, and which was so interesting, and again was one of the highlights. But we went to the Palladium a couple times. I can remember seeing Harry James and his orchestra, and I thought, boy, so this is California. So we had an opportunity to that degree to sort of get an insight of what Southern California was sort of like. But again, that was one of the highlights of my stay in California, aside from the service.
Tell us a little bit about what happened after you came home.
Well, as was the case with a lot of guys getting out of service, my nerves were sort of shot, and I was smoking 3 packs of unfiltered Camels a day, much to the surprise of my mother and dad. But my nerves were sort of frazzled, and I thought, well, what can I do to get through this? Well, a buddy of mine and I, we went to Florida and worked. We worked in Palm Beach, lived in Palm Beach. And he worked at the Breakers Hotel, and I worked at what they called a salon of music on Worth Avenue in Palm Beach. And knocked on doors during the day and rented Cape Art radios and Steinway pianos, because a lot of those people down there did not want something to set over the summer, so they would rent one of that type of equipment for the winter months. And I spent about a year down there, and then trying to decide what to do, and I thought, well, I'm going to give a crack at playing the piano. I had studied piano for a while, and So I went to the Conservatory of Music, it was then College of Music, and studied with a man by the name of John Quincy Bass. Mr. Bass was a soloist with the Cincinnati Symphony at that time. And I studied with him almost a year.
So this is back in Cincinnati.
This is back in Cincinnati, yes, right. This was after getting out of service in February of '46. And Mr. Bass was kind enough to tell me at the end of 6 or 7 months that I just was not the type of guy that could ever succeed in that business, because pure and simply, and I knew this without him telling me, I was not satisfied to spend 6 and 7 hours a day practicing the piano. Well, I decided at that point in time why I didn't come to this decision sooner. I thought, well, what am I doing? Why don't I go back and take advantage of the GI Bill and go back to school? And this I did. I started back to Miami in 1948, the fall of '48. I did not have enough credits that I had got from when I was in school originally in '42, and so I started back in '48. Met my wife in our sophomore year. We went together 3 years. She and I graduated in 1952. December 9th of 1952. We were married on December 14 of 1952, and that was pretty much the involvement of my getting my education after I got out of service. And I repeat this, I'm sorry I didn't do that shortly after. A lot of guys did that got out of service in '46. They immediately started back to school. Well, I just wasn't in that frame of mind at that point, and I'm glad now that I did, because that's one thing, certainly, one of the big pluses that did come out of my spending time in service was getting my college education.
So then what'd you do?
Well, I worked, my last job, I worked for Alice Chalmers in Norwood for 5 years as an application engineer. I went to work for Reliance Electric and Engineering in 1964. I had been transferred to Cleveland and got this job with Reliance Electric in 1964. Went on a 9-month training program with them, and at the end of my training, I was given a choice of staying in the Cleveland district office with Reliance or moving back to Cincinnati. At the time, my mother, who lived in Wilmington, Ohio, had cancer, and they had not given her that much longer to live, and so I elected to come back to Cincinnati, and thank goodness for that, because I had an opportunity to see her on a regular basis in the years preceding her death. I was with Reliance Electric 26 years, and I retired from Reliance in June of 1990. So as the numbers add up, I've been retired now 16 years. So that's pretty much my story, Jack. Unless you had something else.
Well, I was going to say one other question. How do you feel, any more thoughts, let's say, on how you feel the war experience affected the rest of your life?
Well, Jack, I should mention this too, relating to that. I had gone out of high school. I went to high school up in Wilmington, Ohio, and I got out of high school and I elected to take a course or a year down at KMI, Kentucky Military Institute at Linden, Kentucky, which has long since gone out of business. But I just, because of not paying attention as I should have, which a lot of us did not do in high school, I needed some brushing up on sciences, on language, and so that was the main reason I went to KMI. Then I went to Miami and then into the service in '43. But the thing that I look back on, Jack, is the time, the hours that I spent, the year that I spent at KMI, all strictly military. Close order drill, field drills, military science and tactics, really put me, I was amazed, because as I look back on it, that year spent at KMI really prepared me for the time that I was going to spend in service, because of the close order drills, the attitude of living the military life. So it really was a year of preparation for me to go into service. And as I look back on it, the things that today I'm very particular about is my appearance, I'm not going to fall into the rut, I hope, of not being presentable when I go different places and people that I talk to. And so all of this, those well, I can say 3 years in the Army and in the year at military school, those 4 years certainly set a tone for me. And I've never really outgrown it. My wife kids me, she said, well, you know, I look into your closet and there are your shoes all lined up and you've got your shoe trees, and I said, well, I guess all of that, and my shirt and my tie, and I blame it on the service, because I said, well, maybe the service sort of did a number on me and sort of prepared me for this life that I've been living since then.
Okay, anything else you can think of we could talk about here?
No, I think that pretty well covers it, Jack.
But thank you very much for participating in the National Archives and the Hamilton County Library Veterans History Project.
You're most welcome. Thank you,
you.
Jack. And Mike, thank you.